So I wanted to talk about the matchup on the other side. And I guess I'll start because I asked Tuchel about it after the game,
Mm.
and Tuchel was in no mood for anything. Like it was kind of like, last year I think he was in a good mood, so I got a good answer from him. This year was I was kind of disappointed, but he gave me a really short answer. It was like 3 words, and I was kind of hoping that I could get more out of him, but it wasn't happening. And what I asked him was, obviously, like, a big theme in this game was the halftime sub. So he takes Christensen off. He goes to four at the back, and then Reece James starts playing much deeper because he's basically pinned to make sure Vinicius doesn't fly in transition anymore. And one of the things I noticed, because I was literally so close to the benches, I could hear word for word everything Tuchel was saying on the bench. Like I could literally hear what he was saying. Like, and he was yelling at Christensen the whole time, but he was also yelling at the entire right flank the whole time. He was even getting upset at Kante for some of his positional stuff, and he was telling Christensen that he was getting his angles wrong. And one of the things, and I don't, so I'm not entirely sure how to interpret his answer, even though it was short, because he gave an answer, but I wasn't sure if it was because I asked him two questions, and I wasn't sure if the answer was for the first part or second part of the question. But what I asked him was like, oh, before I get into that, one of the things was Reece James in the first half was very high up the pitch. You could see that in his heat map, and because of that, as much as he was giving them really good things on our versus Mendy and behind that space offensively, because he was so high up the pitch, it basically enabled an isolation effect with Vinicius versus Christensen, and that's a huge advantage for us. That's a good matchup for us. And it was almost surprising to me how high of a line Chelsea had without really having good transition defense to make up for it. And one of the reasons Vinicius looked so much better in the first half than he has maybe in previous games was because we were getting him the ball in transition, and all he had to do was cook Christensen. So he makes the sub, and he goes to four at the back. And I think it was a double-edged sword for him, for Tuchel, because on one hand, you didn't really notice Vinicius much in the second half, right? I mean, I
No,
have
true.
to
Yeah.
look at it
Yeah.
again. I
No, no,
didn't
no.
see much.
Yeah, you're right.
And by the same token, Reece James also didn't do much offensively either because he was like kind of worried about Vinicius, and I think it was a double-edged sword for him. One thing that I think Tuchel will be really frustrated about is the fact that he goes into the second half with these subs made, and without even seeing it kind of unfold, immediately Mendy, the goalkeeper, makes the mistake.
Yeah.
So I think he must have been like just losing his shit at that point. I mean, I didn't even look. I mean, I have actually a confession. I was cold, so I went in to get some hot tea, and I had to watch that mistake on the camera, on the TV on the inside, and so I
Uh,
missed that. Yeah, but just regarding the tactical changes and the matchups on that side, I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts. Oh, right, the question I didn't get to that part. So what I asked him was the Christensen sub a byproduct of Vinicius doing all that damage in the first half, and do you think Reece James playing as deep as he did kind of hampered your offense a bit? And he just goes, "Yep, it was my mistake." That was it. That's all he said.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Firstly, just on the subs, and then maybe get to Tuchel a bit more because he is a kind of fascinating guy. But yeah, I mean that's the thing. So they make the two subs. It's I look at actually. So it's basically Christensen for Ziyech and
Right.
Kovacic for Kante. Basically, even though actually it goes down as Kovacic came on technically for Christensen or whatever. But basically that's the change they're making. And yeah, like you said, before you get a chance to see if it works or not, you're 3-1 down. And the 3-1 is just a sucker punch for Chelsea. I think at that point as well, they're the current holders. They've already won the Champions League. They've got the off the field issues. They're 3-1 down. Nothing's going right for them. And that, I think, makes more of an impact on how the second half plays out than any tactical change that Tuchel talked about at halftime. So we don't really know how that would have worked. I mean, this is the thing. Chelsea did stay in the game for the whole second half. They were the better team in the second half because Real Madrid could just sit back a little bit more because they'd done their work. But yeah, if it had stayed 2-1, would Chelsea have been able to come back, get a 2-2 or something like that? Honestly, it was fine margins, and that goal is a proper fork in the road, and probably decides this tie in a way. Maybe Real Madrid would have won it anyway. Maybe Chelsea come back, who knows? But that 3-1 at that exact moment as well, I think was just absolutely huge. To go to Tuchel again, yeah, he's a fascinating guy, and it was interesting that you could hear him because at the game, the semi-final first leg last year, which I was at, you could hear Tuchel shouting, but that was because there was no fans. So to hear him even in a full stadium is quite incredible. But it doesn't surprise me because he was going absolutely crazy on that touchline in that game, and he's a very intense guy, but. And he can be quite funny in press conferences, but I think he doesn't enjoy them, and he especially doesn't enjoy them right now because half of the questions are about the situation with the club, the situation with Abramovich. So I think he's even past the point of relishing a football question. So it's kind of tough to gauge at this point because I think he's just quite frustrated, and obviously a night like this as well. So we saw as well the quote that came out. Tuchel said that this tie is no longer alive. I'm not sure about that either because the question was, is this tie still alive? And Tuchel just said no. So he didn't, he agreed with the sentiment, but he didn't just come out and say this tie is over. So I wouldn't read as much into that quote as maybe some of the media has done afterwards. So I think he's just a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think I cut out for a second there, but I don't know if I'm back, but.
No, I can hear you.
Okay, so the interesting thing about that quote was as you rightly pointed out, it wasn't that he said the tie is alive, but I mean, I actually worded it that way on Twitter, but just to explain it better. But it was the first question in the press conference, and he was asked, is this tie still alive or something to that effect? And he just says no. And I think it's like if I had read that quote and I wasn't at the press conference, I would have said that's probably taken out of context. But because I saw it with my own eyes and I saw the body language, and what was interesting is that later on, I think it was like the last question that someone asked him. Someone asked him like, "Look, you said the tie is not alive. Don't you think that that's the wrong message to your players? And don't you think that's what Real Madrid wants to hear?" And so he was basically asked to elaborate on it, and he basically doubled down on it. I thought he was going to be like, okay, maybe like we can do this, but he was like, what he said was, I'm focused on Southampton. I'm not focused on Real Madrid. This tie is over. If the way we played, given the way we played, this tie is over. And again, whatever, mind game. The funny thing, I actually laughed at the Ancelotti's press conference because someone asked him to comment on the fact that. Tuchel said the tie was over, and he goes, "The tie is open," and it's just like they're just kind of like hitting it back and forth like a tennis match. Like the tie is over, the tie is open, and it's like your team's still in it. No, my team is not still in it. They're just hitting it back and forth. So the Tuchel thing also, just staying on this point for a sec. What I also saw from him in that press conference and just today, I felt was a symptom of like something's wrong, and I sympathize with it just in the sense that I do think your point was valid, that he's tired of answering these questions about Abramovich and the state of Chelsea. The morale there is low, and I don't really know if I have a reference point because I don't notice these things in the Bernabeu, and I wasn't there for the Chelsea games last season because of the pandemic. But he was just batshit crazy today in a way that I haven't even seen Simeone. And he was yelling at his dugout like half the time, complaining about his team. And the contrast between him and Carlo is just stoic and just standing there. He also like nearly died tonight with that.
Yeah, he almost got injured.
I actually
just
have
back from COVID and then got like rugby tackled out the game.
Yeah, we're all worried about Carlo's life for a second here.
Is this the clip?
I think so. Oh no, this is.
No, this is.
Oh shoot! I'll bring it back. Hold on, I'll bring it back. I think I closed the tab by accident. But What is interesting is that, and again, I don't see this experience in the Bernabeu, because also in the Bernabeu, it's not that you're far away from them, but also you have that closed dugout, so it's like they're kind of shielded, so you can't really see them. But David Ancelotti is like the Diego Simeone of the sidelines. Carlo doesn't say anything. He doesn't. He just stands there and just looks around. And
No, I mean, you do see that, I think, from the Bernabeu. Yeah.
okay, well, I haven't really noticed it. Maybe I really noticed it today, where it's like David was
Next
the one
time,
who was
he
going crazy.
especially comes out whenever there's a set piece, whether it's for Real Madrid or against. That's David's time to shine. Maybe he thought this was his whole time to shine today, but no, he comes out and he's barking like crazy at every set piece, and yeah, Tuchel, I think, like last season he was like that. In other games you've seen him like that as well. I think he is just crazy on the sidelines. That's fine, but I think it's just his demeanor pre-match, post-match is just a bit different. But I think that also happens when you've won the Champions League, when you're the reigning champion. You don't have maybe the same motivation to go and win it again. Back to back is cool. Winning a first one, especially for a club like Chelsea that only had one in their history, to win your first Champions League in a decade or so, like they did last year, is massive. To win another one is not maybe as easy to get motivated for, especially when you have these circumstances. So yeah, I think that's why we've seen a slightly different Chelsea team. Also, I mean, we have to say it. This is a very different tournament from last year. Chelsea, when they won the Champions League last year, I don't think they were the best team in Europe when they won it. They didn't win their league. They didn't play a single away game in the Champions League in the stadium of an opponent. They played Atletico in Bucharest, they played Porto in Seville, and they played Real Madrid in Valdebebas. So they never had, I don't want to put like an asterisk on it, because every team had similar circumstances and similar conditions, but it was a unique Champions League. And Chelsea made the most of the circumstances of a COVID behind closed doors season to go, and then they played a great game against Manchester City in the final in Porto. But I don't think Chelsea were the best team in Europe last year, so to see them not be the best team in Europe this year also isn't so surprising. And yeah, you look at how they're doing in the Premier League as well, and they were massive favourites by most people for this tie, but I really think this tie was going to be a lot closer than the way people were talking. Chelsea European champions, yeah, sure, they won it, great, fantastic, but I don't think they were the best team in Europe.
Well, I mean, I was thoroughly impressed with them last season, and I thought they just battered us. I guess the problem is mostly it's not that they didn't deserve it or whatever, but it's just that they're not nearly as good this year. And one of the things I actually pointed out in my tactical preview for this game was that one of their main problems last season was that they couldn't score. I mean, the only reason that it was only 2-0 in the second leg was because they were, combination of Werner and Pulisic and Havertz at some point. I can't remember who else. They missed really good chances, or it wouldn't even get to the chance. They would actually just make bad decisions in transition on the attack when we were just there for the taking. But they weren't putting the ball in the back of the net. So Lukaku theoretically was supposed to help with that. Last year they underperformed their XG in the league. And the funny thing is, this year they've actually overperformed their XG, but it had nothing to do with Lukaku.
It's the other players who have stepped up.
It's the other players, which leads us to a point, not the next necessarily chronological point, but one of the things that I also wrote about was that, okay, despite Lukaku being a bad signing so far, really disastrous signing, but Real Madrid's weakness in defending crosses and set pieces, I was like, at some point, Tuchel has to kind of just airdrop Lukaku in and just see what happens, because we're just so bad defending him. And, you spoke about David Ancelotti coming up for the set pieces. Chelsea had a bunch of free headers today. Literally, as soon as Lukaku came in, we gave him 2 free ones. I mean, that could be correlated, obviously, with Militao also coming out and Nacho being the one defending him. Yeah. But, I mean, it wasn't even – one of them, he was just bigger than Nacho. The second one, he was wide open. So it's not even an aerial – it's not like a physical mismatch. Like, he was wide open. But, man, I got to wonder, if this was the Inter version of Lukaku, would this be a completely different tie? And Tuchel was asked about it, and he said, yeah, if Lukaku scores that header, it's a completely different complexion to this.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look at the chances overall. Real Madrid hit the crossbar with Vinicius. There were other chances too for Real Madrid, but you look at those two massive ones for Lukaku. If they're scoring those two chances, if Mondi doesn't make his mistakes, ifs and buts, but it was maybe a bit closer than the final scoreline, and Chelsea thought they were buying Lukaku to put those chances in the net. He didn't, and it's Benzema who's taken two even more difficult ones, I would say. So, tricky ones. I mean, one of the Lukaku ones was really quite close to going in, and I don't know. If you're playing a player like that and he's not got confidence, he's not starting. Maybe that contributes to it as well. But yeah, this is a Chelsea team that's got a lot of work to do. A lot of got to find their new identity, find how to play with Lukaku, find what they want to do, and rejuvenate that squad. But we're not here to properly analyse Chelsea's summer. We're still got a second leg, and with the squad they have, they can certainly give Real Madrid the game at the Bernabeu. But we have seen some of their problems in the aging defence, and then with Lukaku, just he's not the guy that's going to take their chances, certainly not take 3 chances to complete a turnaround like Benzema did against PSG and taking 3 here as well.
Well, it'll be definitely interesting to see what adjustments Tuchel makes, because I thought like he definitely made the right adjustment in the second half from a defensive perspective anyway. And the away goals are not a thing anymore. Like if the away goals were a thing, I would actually probably side with the idea that this tie is over in a sense. I mean, obviously nothing is ever over. We saw it also that season where Juve came to the Bernabeu and scored 3 goals, and then it took that Cristiano Ronaldo penalty at the end. And so who knows? Anything can happen. But just the fact that he knows, he can kind of see what's wrong, he can diagnose problems, and he can put out adjustments. That I still feel like this tie is very much alive. But